when you study Buddhism thoroughly, you realize that Buddhism go beyond this gender issue. Enlightenment is for everyone. And because of that, the Buddha allowed the women to be ordained, because women can also be enlightened.
I see this kind of colonial, white man's burden kind of viewpoint. We're the Westerners. We've got it all sorted out. We've got to drag these backwardations into the 21st century.
I can't live my life frightened of standing on the truth that I know and speaking about that.
I was brought up Buddhist. When I was a child, my parents had built a bush temple and invited a Thai monk to stay with us. He taught us in the Thai forest tradition, which aims to live by the Buddha's teachings given 2,500 years ago. I returned to the Buddhist teachings as an adult in search of a spiritual path. I found one particular teaching of the Buddha very powerful, the teaching of not self, meaning we are not defined by characteristics such as body, mind, gender, or ethnicity. I assumed I had the option to be ordained as a bhikkhuni, or female monk, in the Thai forest tradition, but I soon discovered the shocking truth. No matter how committed I was or how much my practice advanced, I would never be granted this right. The Buddha, who taught equality, would surely be surprised by this. 2,500 years ago, he made the radical decision to ordain both men and women. At the time, women couldn't be ordained in any spiritual discipline. He called the ordained men bhikkhus and the ordained women bhikkhunis, and gave them both a code of conduct called the Vinaya. The Buddha established a fourfold sangha, or community, which included bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, laymen and lay women. But in the monastic practice of Buddhism today, I discovered discrimination and inequality based on gender. What happened? How and why did the role of women in Buddhism change so drastically? In Thailand, I met Bhikkhuni Dhammananda, who has founded a women's monastery to revive the female order, despite opposition from the Thai authorities. They say it is wrong for women to wear orange robes, as it is seen to be impersonating monks.
We know that this is responsibility given to us by the Buddha. And even the monks do not have right to take away this responsibility, which is actually handed down. I see it as a heritage, a very special heritage that we are keeping it. The Thai Sangha, or the Thai community of monks, became one-sided. It's simply because they had been like this for the last 700 years, so they could not think otherwise. In fact, it is very much Buddhist culture for women to be ordained. And when the Buddha set up the Sangha, community of monks and women, the only problem is that in Thailand we don't have the female order.
The two major schools of Buddhism today are Mahayana and Theravada. In Mahayana countries, such as China, Korea and Vietnam, the bhikkhuni lineage is still strong, although the bhikkhunis there must still defer to monks. But in Theravada countries, such as Cambodia, Sri Lanka and Thailand, the bhikkhuni lineage died out almost 1,000 years ago. Traditionalists do not believe it can or should be revived. They argue that new bhikkhunis can't be ordained because ordination requires a quorum of both bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. And without the Theravada Bhikkhuni lineage, a quorum cannot be achieved. In Thailand, Buddhist nuns known as Meishi wear white robes rather than the orange robes of the Bhikkhuni. These nuns can only practice 8 precepts or training guidelines, the same as any layperson can, while the novice monk practices 10 precepts and is generally more supported in the training.
In Thailand, there was no role for ordained women. So they shave their head, which looks like monastic, but they are not allowed to put on the robes because they are not being given the ordination procedure. Therefore, they just put on white robe as a kind of renunciant, just an expression of a homeless lifestyle. The Meshi was not in the Buddhist text, but because we don't have ordination for women, so these women wanting to have this religious lifestyle, but the path is not made for them properly. Some of the independent Meshis try to set up their own center, and the nunnery, that they can be apart from the monks, so that they don't have to be simply serving the monks only. So they wanted to express their role in monastic life.
Another big difference between the Meshi and the Bhikkhuni is that the Bhikkhuni can carry out the ancient tradition of collecting food offerings from the local villagers, which in turn brings the villagers good merit. But the Meshi are not eligible for this type of support.
ขอเหล่าเทวดาทั้งปวงจงรักษาท่านด้วยอานุภาพแห่งพระพุทธเจ้าด้วยอานุภาพแห่งพระธรรมด้วยอานุภาพแห่งพระสงฆ์
To find out what the Thai Sangha think about Bhikkhuni ordination, I visit one of the most senior Western monks of the Thai forest tradition. Originally from England, Ajahn Jayasaro has been living in Thailand since 1978.
We're all agreed, basically, we want to be creating structures and environments in which women can practice the Dhamma in the way that monks do, or as a similar, but and in what particular form that could be pursued, that everyone can live with that. The Theravada tradition, its identity, has always been founded upon the conservatism and maintaining the tradition laid down by the first council of monks following the death of the Buddha. If the bhikkhuni option is just pushed too much, and then you strengthen the more conservative factions in the Theravada Sanghas, and there'll be no real acceptance or harmony between the two groups in the long run.
The forest tradition took root in the West in the 1970s, bringing with it the conservative attitudes and hierarchies that exist in Thailand. I visited the first Western monastery of this tradition in a small hamlet in rural England.
Well, when we first came, nothing was that formed. Things were happening. It was a very young community. There was a lot of energy, a lot of idealism. It was very powerful in that way. I think all of us, for our own different reasons, felt for sure we want to take this path as far as we can, and that was the form. Was to shave your head, take precepts, put on a robe, and start. Yeah. And that was very much how we started. It felt very radical in a way, just to cut our hair and then eventually shave it and to wear robes. I felt very outside of my culture. I felt okay about that because I was very committed to the Dhamma practice. Increasingly, I've begun to, as the men that had come into the order at the same time as ourselves and were getting the bhikkhuni ordination as mendicants and being seen as part of Sangha, and I began to realise we weren't actually seen as part of the Sangha. We were seen as, actually I don't quite know how we were seen. We were like an appendage. I think we were just shaped by how it was done in Thailand. We were there to enable the monk's journey in some ways.
For a while they felt they'd like to take it a bit deeper, because basically no one knew how this thing worked, how the nuns training worked. All they had was the Thai model, which nobody knew that thoroughly anyway. And so they do things like cooking and driving, handling money, things of this nature. They wanted to give that up. So after a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, we went to Thailand and talked to the Thai elders about what could be done. And they said, well, you can take the 10 precepts, which means giving up money. And they'd also sort of become more like alms mendicants, which means they don't cook. So they'd be out of the kitchen.
This adapted form of ordination is called the Sila Dara. Although it is a small step forward, it limits nuns to being a novice with no option to advance as a bhikkhuni.
There are things, frustration and doubt, not about the practice, not about the Dharma at all, but gender.
It's an ancient tradition, and a hallmark of it is its adherence to the earliest teachings and practices, and so these come from a completely different time, completely different cultural context, one in which I would never have liked to live myself as a woman. And so here we are, these 2,500 years later, with the Thai cultural overlay. Everything that we have has come to us through the generosity of supporters. Much of the support comes from local people, but an awful lot also comes from Thais, locally and overseas. And there is that sense of, well, how do you honour that support and honour the cultural context in which you find yourself without alienating people?
This idea that it's all actually in one's heart and you can realize the truth without having any conditions externally that's true on an ultimate level. But in the practical level, what it does is it can be an opportunity for a disconnect with what's really happening, and using a kind of language in order to not take appropriate action and responsibility for seeing that the conditions are supportive and conducive for awakening.
In the Buddha's time, bhikkhunis took 311 rules, which is 84 more than bhikkhus. While the Sila Dara nun officially takes only 10 precepts, she in fact practices many more and leads a similar life to a bhikkhuni. Just like a bhikkhu, she owns nothing but her bowl and her robes, relying completely on the Buddhist supporters for her food, shelter and medicine. For some women, 10 precepts are enough, but there are others who wish to follow the original path given by the Buddha. It was in Sri Lanka that the first Theravada bhikkhuni ordination took place in the 1980s, paving the way for more to come, including that of Ayasudama, who in 2003 was the first American-born woman to become a Theravada bhikkhuni.
Well, my ordination was 2003, but I went to Sri Lanka because I wanted to serve bhikkhunis. I finally had the thought, who am I to want to become a bhikkhuni when I've never served bhikkhunis? And this opportunity for higher ordination arose while I was there. There was something so different about the higher ordination for me. For one, I truly had the entire livelihood of like a bhikkhu, of a bhikkhuni, in a way I hadn't had as a 10 preceptor. I hear so much from so many people, more and more these days, about how oppressive these rules are, how terrible they are. I'm like, no, they're not terrible, they're not oppressive. This is our ticket to freedom. Please stop trying to take it from me. It's a whole livelihood, it's a whole dance of support between the lay people and the bhikkhus or bhikkhunis that you just don't have with 10 precepts, particularly with 8 precepts. In addition, you get the whole package of Vinaya-based lifestyle and a respect from the people that I hadn't known would be there. There are many accusations that women just want to ordain to gain that respect. You know, you just want to puff yourselves up, that kind of thing. It was so much more than that. It was so deep for me. I wanted to be the Buddha's child.
Despite the early attempts at reviving the Theravada Bhikkhuni order, there remains great resistance from many Buddhist traditions around the world. In 2007, His Holiness the Dalai Lama initiated an international conference in Hamburg on the role of women in Buddhism. This was in response to requests to open a dialogue on this issue.
I felt a deep regret that as a novice, that's all I could ever be, since the Tibetan tradition did not allow me to take full ordination. A few years later, when I went to Hong Kong for the Bhikshuni ordination, there was a tremendous sense of fulfillment that finally I could be a part of this precious monastic lineage stretching all the way back in an unbroken line to the Lord Buddha himself. So why should nuns be denied this deep monastic satisfaction which the monks take for granted as their right?
I think I'm 100% sure if Buddha today here, certainly he give us the permission, the bhikshunis. Oh, in any way, bhikshuni ordination much easier way. That's no doubt. But unfortunately now no more Buddha here. So I don't know how to. I cannot act as a Buddha. That's clear.
Your Holiness, Mahaparinirvana Sutra, when the Buddha was about to die, he did give permission that minor rules, if Sangha should decide, go ahead. So you don't need to wait for the future Buddha.
I was very thrilled that the conference happened. It was a devastating conclusion, I have to say, because I felt what happened when the door remained closed was that it pushed it back on the women to have to almost prove themselves even more. You know, it's like, you know, I felt for the nuns. It's like, well, maybe you can come to Dharamsala and practice and inspire people. And I said, well, what do they have to do to have, you know, the goalpost moved, really? What do they have to do to be accepted?
After the conference, some members of the Buddhist community in England took steps to prevent bhikkhuni ordination from taking place there. I tried to speak with monks and nuns involved, but no one was willing to discuss what had happened. Meanwhile, some progressive monks in Australia were pushing for change.
The Sangha in Amarawati and Chithurst was putting together what's called the 5 rules, what they call, I think, the 5 points of clarification. This came out as a direct response to the opening of dialogue around bhikkhuni ordination. It came out as a direct response to the Hamburg conference on bhikkhunis. And essentially the 5 points of clarification say that the nuns have to always walk behind the monks, that they can't give Dhamma talks while monks are present in the room, and even if they are invited to give a Dhamma talk in front of monks when monks are present in the room, that doesn't set a precedent so that they can do it again in the future, and so on and so forth, and a whole bunch of rules like this. And the last one is that the 10 precept ordination platform, which the nuns are following in those communities, does not form a stepping stone to bhikkhuni ordination. So it was specifically formed to prevent and become an obstacle to bhikkhuni ordination. The nuns were asked to accept these rules, and if they didn't accept it, they were told that the monks would not perform any more ordinations for them. So effectively the future of the community would be throttled. So the nuns were quite distraught at both at the rules and also at the way that it was presented to them. But eventually, having no choice, they decided to accept them.
During this time, a monastery of the forest tradition in Western Australia decided to go the other way. For the first time in the forest tradition's recent history, a bhikkhuni ordination of 4 women took place in October 2009.
As you know, internationally, the discussion about the bhikkhuni ordination was getting stronger and stronger. And I, as the spiritual director of the Buddhist Society here and the committee, we considered that there was no reason to deny that. In fact, it would be wrong to deny the legitimate aspirations of 4 women for the bhikkhuni ordination. They had practiced well, they fulfilled every possible criteria, and also in the development of the research on the bhikkhuni ordination became very clear to me and the other monks at the monastery at Serpentine that there was no legal obstacle for that.
Obviously we knew that people would talk about it and that some people wouldn't like it. We had no idea of the scale and the swiftness and the energy of the opposition to it. It was immediately clear to me that there was, again, there was something else, that there's some underlying force which is driving it. It's not just the fact of the ordination as such.
I think it's generally agreed in Thailand and Burma, at least, sort of the heartland of Theravada Buddhism, that those ordinations are not valid by the Theravada understanding of what a bhikkhuni ordination consists of or should consist of. If the leaders of the Sangha or the official policy of the Thai Sangha has been decided on a particular issue, then individual monks or individual monasteries don't have the right to just unilaterally declare that they don't agree with that anymore, that they're going to follow their own view. So it's not so much a reasoned view based upon analysis of text as the idea that the strength and the continuity of the Sangha is based upon consensus.
Our greatest respect would be for the Dhamma Vinaya. And part of that states that every monastic community is independent. We have to make our own resolutions, within the Vinaya. And any monk or nun outside of your community has no say. This is the way the Buddha established a community, as autonomous.
For us, the ordination was about the women who wanted to become ordained, and it was about supporting them to live their spiritual journey and to fulfill their dreams and to support them to practice in accordance with the way that the Buddha practiced. And from our point of view, we were gathering together in a Sangha in a way that was prescribed and laid down very clearly in the monastic discipline, passed down for the last 2,500 years. We performed the ceremonies in the exact same way, in the exact same language as has been passed down for the last 2,500 years, and we were participating in that great kind of river of community and tradition which has flourished all across the Buddhist world for such a long time.
The ordination went ahead without the approval of the Thai Sangha, and as a result, the Western Australian monastery was delisted. The bhikkhunis there are not officially recognised within the Thai forest tradition.
To me it was a very holy moment. And actually, after the ordination you truly feel there's a change, and you can't quite express it in words, but in yourself you feel that you are part of that very ancient tradition, of that very ancient bhikkhu and bhikkhuni sangha, and it's quite awesome at times. But you also feel the greater responsibility of representing the bhikkhunis, of representing the robe, not only to yourself, to your other fellow monastics, but also to the community at large. If you are engulfed in a complete, beautiful, handed down and many times proven system of training. So this is, I think, a great gift which doesn't take anything away from anyone. And I think women and all of us, we have supported monks for many, many years. And just by being able to have the same opportunity of training, and actually, I don't want any favors. I just only want to have the opportunity to prove myself.
If there's any change going to take place in the heartland of Theravada Buddhism, then needs to come from Theravada women in these countries. And if the impulse is coming from the West, I don't think that it will be that effective, except amongst a very small number of middle class, more cosmopolitan groups. The women that I know who are nuns are generally, I've got all the conditions that I need for practice. I have solitude, I have support for requisites, and I have teachers that I can speak to and ask for advice. And many women say, well, this is good enough for me. If Thai Buddhist women come together and they say, this is an unjust system, we've been oppressed, what can you do about it? Then that would really be something that I have to really consider, and monks would have to consider. But it's not. It's just a very minor phenomena in this country.
ชัยโยโหตุขอแม่พระธรณีแม่พระคงคาพญามัจจุราชอมาตย์ทั้งสี่พุทธบัญญัติภิกษุณีก็ต้องทำตามพระพุทธบัญญัติเราก็ต้องทำตามพุทธบัญญัติในเมื่อพระพุทธศาสนาบอกไว้ว่าให้มีแค่ไหนเราก็ต้องมีแค่นั้นนะภิกษุณีให้มีกี่ปีนะคะกี่ปีเราก็จะต้องมีแค่นั้นเราไม่ชิงดีชิงเด่นไม่อยากได้อยากดีอะไรนะคะจิตสำคัญปรารถนาอยู่เท่านี้นะคะปรารถนาอยู่ว่าเราเป็นภิกษุณีเราก็ไม่ได้เอาอะไรไปตามนุ่งขาวหมดจดฝ่านุ่งขาวเราต้องเดินให้ตรงเดินให้ถูกทาง
Some Thai women have also been seeking bhikkhuni ordination from lineages in Sri Lanka and elsewhere as a way to get around the Thai opposition. Now, small bhikkhuni monasteries are popping up in Thailand, like this one I visited in the north. The Thai people support them in the same way they support monks, offering food, land and resources.
When I was a nun, 1 or 2 years a nun, I don't know that in the future I am a bhikkhuni. I don't know I will have this place. I don't know I will have buildings, many people come. I never know before. But when it happened, it's okay. It's happened in the present time. Just only that, and then it's appear and then it's disappear. So don't cling to it, and don't cling to the future.
Many kind of women come here, not only from the government office, but the lay people from anywhere. I think not only in Chiang Mai, but many provinces in Thailand, and maybe some from abroad.
I never thought that we would see women in the robe in my lifetime. And when it happened, it was like a contagious disease. It goes from one country to another. And because of this globalization, we are connected so very quickly. Of course, we need time to prove to them that as female Sangha, as Bhikkhuni Sangha, we are going to contribute something to our society. And I think before you know it, the ball has already started to roll, so to say.
Once a bhikkhuni gains 10 years in the robe, she can ordain new bhikkhunis. In 2010, the first Theravada ordination involving both bhikkhus and bhikkhunis took place in the United States. Finally, after centuries of resistance, the bhikkhuni lineages are growing in numbers and support around the world.
The monastic tradition is a tradition of renunciance. It's much easier to renounce as a bhikkhu or as a bhikkhuni. You have the support structure, you have the expectations, you have the vinaya. Everything there is supporting you. Obviously you have to relate to the Western world, but if you look at the original Vinaya and the suttas, there's no problem there at all. Where there is a problem is if you keep the cultural interpretations. That is the impasse. You keep the Vinaya and separate that from the culture, and you find that Buddhism will fit very perfectly in every Western culture.
Now in monasteries like Dharmasara in Western Australia, Novices such as Upeka have the option of devoting their entire life to a spiritual practice with the full support of the Sangha.
It's a journey that evolved. I've tried the good life. I traveled to the nth degree, I partied to the nth degree. I actually asked when I was about 25 if I could come here to ordain. And within a week I changed my mind and got married. Yeah, which is a good thing because I guess I needed to have done that. I guess to me it's not a commitment but a great joy. Yeah, great joy, and I feel like grateful really every day to live this life. I don't think I've lost anything at all. In fact, I think, why don't more people become nuns?
There are questions which you can ask a bhikkhuni which you will never ask a monk, and you get answers which I will never be able to give you. And they have their special place, which monks will never be able to fulfill.
Sadhu, sadhu, anumodami.
And if we don't have a bhikkhuni, it means it's this big hole in Buddhism, in the teaching and the dissemination of the Dhamma. And when there's this big hole and discrimination, it is discrimination there, call it by its proper name. And it also means that Buddhism will never grow either in Thailand or in the West.
So I think if we are doing something positive, that vibration, that energy is a good energy, and I believe that the society will be opening their heart for it. If you hear more about good women doing something somewhere, talk about it, tell the world about it, and then it's encouraging others to do the same thing.
So this is your mark.
The bhikkhuni ordination is there, it's growing, it will continue to grow. And I ask everyone to look, it's a bandwagon, get on the bandwagon, otherwise you get crushed under the wheels.
These women are regaining the spiritual path that was given to them by the Buddha, inspiring us and lighting the way for those who plan to follow.